I spent all of my focus on one thing for a little less than 3 years, and that earned me a 7-figure Etsy shop. Now, I'm not from the US. In fact, I'm from Sweden, and being a non-US seller came with its own set of difficulties. So in this video, I'm gonna show you how you too can have a 7-figure Etsy shop, even if you're a non-USPTO seller and if you have almost no money to start with, like $20 maybe. So to start off, I just want to say that it's 100% possible. Because of that, I'm going to show you some examples here from my own store, which you can see it here, and it's 100% possible. I know it can seem intimidating and there's so many things just to know, but I can promise you, if you put the reps in and then you reflect on the progress, and then after you reflected on the progress, you start to iterate, you will eventually make progress, because pain plus reflection equals progress. It just takes a lot of reps and a lot of reflection and a lot of iteration to actually make some significant progress. Now, a big other hurdle that I want to talk about is that if you're a non-US seller like me, taxes can be a big hurdle to overcome. Especially since a lot of the tax companies, at least here in Sweden, that's the only ones that I've had experience with, well, they actually turn you down once you come with your business, because they have customers pouring into their company. There's no shortage of customers from their perspective, which means that they can be really picky about their own clients. At least usually that's the case if it's good and reputable companies. But I can tell you, I've had to go through some of those companies myself and just had to talk to a lot of people just to get to the company that I'm now have been working with for quite a while. So I can just say that you just have to see it as the conversion rate on Etsy. If you have 3 or 4% conversion rate, then it's 3 or 4 out of 100 that will be good, good companies to work with for you, but you still have to go through 100 people to even get to those specific 3 or 4 companies. I know that can seem a lot, but if you think of it that way, then it becomes like a numbers game, which makes it a lot easier. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about in this video too is credit cards. So I've been receiving some questions about credit cards lately, and a big thing when it comes to that is that, when it comes to me here in Sweden, is that they don't work at all like they do in the US. So all my USPTO friends, they can usually easily get their own credit card and then just pay all of their POD bills with that, and then they gain the perks. Now, at least here in Sweden, I basically have a perfect credit score, but even with that, it's been so hard to find a good credit card from my own end. And once I actually found one, I'm not going to name exactly which one it is because I did not have a good experience with it. But once I actually found one that I would want to work with, they gave me a super low credit first of all, which was really weird. Remember, I almost have basically a perfect credit score. I even looked this up myself because I really didn't understand, nor did my accountant understand, why I couldn't get a big limit on a good credit card. But basically, I found one credit card that had a really low exchange rate. With the bank, that's usually between 1 to 2%. But with credit cards, I found one that had a really low exchange conversion fee, but they didn't even really wanna give me a good credit limit, which was super weird. So I tried for a year, but still they wouldn't really give me a good credit limit for some weird apparent reason that I don't understand. So basically what I ended up having with my credit card was my credit card became a backup card for when my bank account doesn't work. So if something happens with my bank account, then I can just use the credit card to fulfill my orders. So that's basically it's been the use for me when it comes to credit cards. If anyone knows, at least in Sweden, knows of a good credit card to use, I'd love to know. Just comment down below which one it is and I'll check it out. But as of right now, I haven't found a good credit card to actually use for these POD things. Another hugely important thing that I really want to touch on is VAT. It can also be called sales tax or GST, depending on where you live, because each country has their own term for this specific thing. In the US, it's called sales tax. Here in Sweden, it's called VAT, or basically in all of Europe, it's called VAT. I think in Australia, maybe it's called GST, but basically it's the same thing. It's a tax that's put on top of an item's sale price, and consumers are supposed to pay this. So if you and your company basically are not registered for VAT, that means that you will be billed VAT on top of your fees. Now, I live in Sweden, and here in Sweden it's 25%. If I do Etsy ads and they cost $10,000 for a full month, if my business isn't VAT registered, in that case I don't have a VAT ID applied into my Etsy account. So instead of $10,000, it would be $12,500. And the added basically 2.5K into that is just VAT, which is crazy. So I implore you, this is really, really important to make this Etsy thing work. I mean, like, I don't know how it is in other countries. I think it's like 20% in the UK, but VAT is a massive fee. If you are like not VAT registered, from my own perspective, in my own opinion, it's been a really important thing to actually make this Etsy thing and this whole POD thing work. Because instead of paying an extra like 2.5k 1 month when you do like 10k in ads, you could profit that yourself. It's really hard to just make this whole thing go in the direction that you want if you pay VAT on top of your fees. Because remember, it's not just one fee, it's all fees that you pay to Etsy when you make a sale basically. It's the processing fee, it's the transaction fee, it's the Etsy ads. It will basically just so hard if you're paying VAT on top of your fees, because as a business, you're not supposed to pay VAT, and it will not be there if you have a VAT ID registered in your account. That's my own opinion, but that's been my experience with Etsy. It's been something that's really important to make this whole thing work, because otherwise the fees would just be too great. Now, another topic that I want to touch on for us foreign sellers is exchange rate is a big thing. But it doesn't really have to be. So I've honestly, personally, never really thought about, I've thought about exchange rates, but I haven't thought about them day to day basically. And the reason for that is because the margin is so high. If you do 30 to 40% in gross margin, that means that any fluctuations in like exchange rates from day to day, at least from in my experience with the Swedish krona to USD, they're not that high. Plus, it doesn't affect your net margin that much because you have a good gross margin. So I've just received so many questions regarding exchange rate, if you need to like change it from day to day depending on the fluctuations with the exchange rate. And I just found that you don't even have to think about it as long as you have a 30 to 40% gross margin. That just like negates the whole thing in and of itself. You don't even have to think about it as long as you have a good gross margin basically. But another part to that too is that if you basically set a currency in your store that's different from the one that's in your bank, that means that you will actually incur a 2.5 conversion fee on all payments to your bank. That's also a lot of money. If you don't have a VAT ID and you have like another currency, let's say that you live in the UK and then you swap out the currency in your store from pounds to USD. That means that you don't have a VAT ID on top of that. That means that you're paying 20% I think in VAT on top of your fees. Plus, you actually incur a 2.5 conversion fee once the payments are being sent out to your bank. That's crazy to me. It would make this whole thing so much harder. And plus, when it comes to Etsy, when someone basically views your store, they always see your listings in their own native currency. If they live in the US, they see your listings in US dollars. If they live in UK, for instance, they will see it in pounds. It's totally dependent on where their customer lives, not on your currency in your store. Which is why I would strongly recommend to just keep your native currency, the one that's in your bank, within your Etsy store. I've also received some questions regarding like if you're gonna use like a US bank for some reason. But in order to make this business work correctly, in my opinion, the best thing is just to use the bank that you actually have in your native country on Etsy. If you're a sole proprietor, like an individual, just register your sole proprietorships bank accounts and that bank within Etsy. As simple as that. I would really not implore you to like use another bank and have them send it to your regular bank and stuff like that. Just use your own. Just use your own bank that you already have to make this whole process easier. Anything else basically just makes the process a lot harder. Now, there's two more things that I really want to go over, and the first one is a big one. That's bulk approval by Printify. What I mean by this is that you should, in my opinion, you should have this bulk approval at a set time, set to any time that you want during the day that fits your schedule. But what this basically means is that you can just, like if you sync orders to Printify and they're all on hold, at a set time, they will then go out all at the same time. And this means that you will only have one charge on your bank account. Now, this is really, really important because in 2023, I didn't really know about this feature. And I had my orders set to this, to manual instead. What this actually did in practice was that I got charged for every single order that I just put through to production. And after about in intense periods like Q4, if I had like above 120 or 130 orders, I think it was, then my bank declined me, because remember, these are foreign transactions for us. So, and it kind of looks fishy for the bank, so it triggers their like security systems. Even when I talk to them to just figure this stuff out and just tell them exactly what I'm doing, like give them all the info they need, you just couldn't get around this one fact. So The best way to deal with this problem, as someone who doesn't live in the US but only exclusively sell to the US, is to just put all the orders through at a set time by using this feature, which is just to have order approval to automatically at a set time. And then you can just set it to a time that works the best for you. But that was a huge thing. Once you like scale your shop and you're doing over 100 a day, I would highly recommend to do this, so that your bank doesn't decline you, because then you basically decline for all foreign transactions for like 24 hours. And this can be really harsh in the, like if you're in Q4 where time is of the essence. And the last thing that I would really want to touch on is that you should only sell to the US, in my opinion. Even like me, I'm from the EU, but it's so important to not sell to the EU specifically because we have so many regulations here. So the easiest thing to just focus on is in the US, because remember, like if you when I do all my research, I basically use Everbee, and if you're searching for like t-shirt or something like that, let's see here, most of these are just US based stores, or they're targeting at least US, like the US. So to make this whole process easier, I think it's important to just rely on data. And the easiest way to just rely on data is to just focus on the US, and like all the shops that are only targeting US. Most shops are actually doing that, which makes it easier. But let's say that you want to focus on the EU for any apparent reason, and then you have to find shops that just specifically targets the EU, because if you download the data using Everbee and you have mixed the US, like US shops, like shops that are targeting the US, mixed with shops that target the EU or specific countries within the EU, and the data will be skewed. So I think it's really important to just simplify everything and make this process easier. And a good way to do that is just to focus all your efforts on the place that has the biggest market share, which is the US. And that makes the whole process with Everbee so much easier.